Good afternoon. COVID, you're room B.
Yeah. So I will leave.
Okay.
And so Anna, well, I've got you on here.
Sure.
Jason said something about put some slides up on the screen. Will those pop up automatically or?
Let me share the slides that I had up. So you can see what he's talking about.
Okay.
Um,
So they will pop up automatically, you think?
Actually, he should send those to you. When you look at the cheat sheet,
Yeah.
on the where is it? Oh yes, on the first page it says PowerPoint folder.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Stop for a minute. Is that Douglas?
Hi.
Hey, is
Hey,
that
sorry.
Douglas?
Yep, I'm gonna get my picture working.
No worries, no worries.
How are you?
Doing? You know, I am doing excellent. Oh, there you
Hey,
are.
nice to see you.
Good to see
Familiar
you.
face. I thought I remembered your name from past conferences.
Yes, yes, yes. I'm excited about your workshop.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah,
You know,
I was real selfish. I hosted ones that I wanted more information.
That's pretty smart. Have you been to a few already?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
I hosted 2 last week, and then the ones that I kind of helped troubleshoot for, they're also on things that I want to attend. So
Cool.
it's been good. It's been fun.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You know Abra Dresdel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Abra and I and a few other folks were gonna do a presentation at Yale in March, kind of around this at a reducing recidivism conference.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was like where we started kind of brainstorming around the name and the topic and such. So yeah.
Yeah, well, this
I haven't
is good.
seen
It's
Abra
much needed.
Yeah, I know, especially in the agriculture community. You know, they have to be talking about these things.
Yes, yes. So I don't know if you want to try anything. I set it up where anyone can share their screen.
Okay.
So if you want to try that control for me, we have a little time.
Okay. Let's see. So I don't need to send it to you.
No, you could do it straight.
Okay.
At the bottom, if you move your cursor down there, you'll see your control. So you'll see mute, stop video.
Yes. Right.
And there's a green button that says share screen.
Ah, cool. Okay, so I can click on the PowerPoint. Okay. Let's see.
Okay.
So can you see that?
Yes. Excellent. Excellent.
And then if I go to slideshow, right? Or I have to do, oh, I see. I have to do that on my.
Yes, you would do that on yours. So you still have control of your own PowerPoint, but we can see it.
So say like right now, do you see you still see the PowerPoint?
Yes, I do. So
rad. Okay.
try advancing like you would normally if you were in front of us.
Okay. So
yes.
That's the beginning?
That's the beginning.
Can you see my notes?
I do, but if you, there's a way to change that so that we only see the, what am I trying to say? We only see the slide. So if you look at the bottom too, where it says slideshow, you want to move it to where it looks like a little screen. It's at your bottom right. Move over one more there. Click on that. Okay. And that should get rid of it.
Okay.
If not, we'll go to view.
Oh, this is awesome.
Yeah. We'll go to view.
Okay. It looks like it's loading.
Okay. Now you mentioned to me you wanted this kind of interactive, so I'm going to let you lead me on it. What will happen? That's what we want to see. That's excellent.
Okay, so that's the full screen.
Yes, yes. So
Okay.
we don't see your notes, just the screen.
Okay. If I can't see my notes right now, can I escape from this?
You can. So just, there you go. So it's
Okay.
up to you how you want to use it. I know you mentioned you want to do some interactive activities, so you just let me know when to lead into that. Like if you want people to do a reflection, if you want people to report out on their reflection.
Yeah.
Because it's a little different because we're not in person.
Right. So my thought, I was going to ask everybody to just introduce themselves in the chat. So,
Okay.
just so folks know who each other are, I guess.
Okay.
And
you'll be able to see the chat. If at any time
Yes.
you can't see it, let me know and I can, work with you on that.
Okay. And then, so you can see like this slide, Enclosure Movement. So
Yes.
starting here, what I was going to do is there's like 9 slides that go, my idea is just like a brief history of the US food system, from my take, and ask folks. So like I was going to stay on this slide for a minute, ask folks to just like write down any reflections, feelings that they have about the text or the pictures, and then go to the next slide for a minute, do the same, and then after the 9 slides, after like 9 minutes, I'll come back to the first one and ask people if anybody wants to share their reflections on this first slide.
Okay.
And then do the same for the next. So it's, take like 2 to 3 minutes per slide for folks to just say a few things.
Great. Okay.
So I guess that people can raise their hand, so we can.
They can. There is a reaction feature where they can raise their hand. We could do it one at a time. You can call people. I would suggest as people come in, you put it on at the top. You can set up how you want to see your screens.
Right.
So I always tell people use gallery view so you could see everyone.
Right. Okay.
And I can I can monitor that for you. So if you've missed people, I can say, hey, there's a person that's trying to get your attention or something.
Okay.
Like that. And I know we talked about questions, so I agree with you. It might be good to save questions to the end. You can just let me know. A lot of people just say, hey, Anna, do we have any questions?
Okay. Okay.
So go ahead.
I'll just introduce that to folks that like I'm going to ask for a minute, and then when we're done, if anybody wants to share what they said, so I can introduce that, I guess.
Okay. Now in the beginning, I do have a quick intro, and it is quick.
That's great.
So we also do a land recognition
Wonderful
piece right before, so that people get the opportunity. We have a link that they can go to so that they can see the Massachusetts, or even where their state is, because we know the summer conference, everyone's coming from all parts of the region, so they can see where their area is and see the original owners, the First Nations that were here previous.
That's great.
To us.
I was going to do that, so I'm glad you're going to do that. Awesome.
And I invite you to do that. We do ask the host to do that as well. And you're kind of set up for it. So what I like about this, once I do my thing, you fly the ship. Okay. And you just let me know what I need to do. I'll be looking for any technical issues, but at this point, once I do that, it's all yours.
All right. And I guess I have one thing. I'm feeling like I might need my notes.
Okay. That's fine.
That is just because there's some things that I have written that like definitions and such.
Right.
There isn't a way for me to see like my notes without everybody seeing my notes, right?
Are you near a printer? Because this is something I've done before. Okay. You could print it out as is for yourself.
Yeah.
And then go to presentation mode.
Yeah. I don't. But that's okay. I can. I don't know.
Let's see.
Oh, actually, I might be able to use another computer.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
I can send this to myself real quick.
Okay, because we
Email
have
it.
time. I'm gonna put my, it's
That'd be awesome.
4:52, so I'm gonna put my screen up
Okay.
with the title slide while you do that, and that way
Alright.
you can keep your notes
I'll send it
and
to you.
go to presenter view.
All right, perfect.
Hey, Jason.
Oh, hey, Jason.
Hey, howdy. How are you?
Hi, good.
Good. We're
Thanks
just
for
doing
being
our
here.
final tech checks.
Good, good. I'm glad you guys are rolling.
Yeah.
I know you're in good hands. So
Yes,
Well,
thank you.
inshallah, we'll see.
So far, so good.
Yeah, so far so good. So, Douglas, take your time and do that. I'm going to share my screen and start letting people in probably the
Okay.
next 2 minutes.
All right,
Mhm.
awesome.
This should be good.
I hope so. We'll
It
see.
will be.
It's
It will be. I'm
a,
glad we're doing
a
it.
small little bit of the whole process.
Yeah, but it's a good process.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
So you can
Have
send
you
it.
seen the other workshops from last week?
I haven't yet.
Mm-hmm.
No, I just
They're
got back
good.
from a long, was driving across the country. So I
Wow.
just got back.
Where did you go?
Washington State.
Okay. Okay. How was that?
It was beautiful. I was,
Oh, wow.
yeah, out with loved ones and friends on the Olympic Peninsula.
Ooh.
So just a little bit east of Seattle.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was a really fun drive. I mean, I was in my pickup truck, so it wasn't the most comfortable, but we got to go places and just see the mountains and see the deserts, and so.
That's good.
But
That's
yeah,
good.
yeah. And I was getting ready for this. How's your summer been? Are you growing? Are you?
Yes, yes. My husband and I, we have our own garden that we eat from, and I preserve food from. Sometimes I sell stuff. But then on behalf of NOFA, I do work with a group of youth leaders over at Home City Housing at their community garden at one of their apartment sites.
Is that in Springfield?
It's in Springfield. I'm based in Springfield.
Cool.
And this is going on our 4th year with them. They have a beautiful community garden. We do all kinds of organic farming courses with them. The food is harvested and given to the youth. Given to the families in Tapley Court apartments, scattered sites. And now we just got, from the Department of Agriculture, we got a grant to do bioremediation with GTC and at another site at Home City Housing, and the youth are involved with that.
Wow.
And then we just have a new site opening at Open Pantry that includes Roca Open Pantry, the Springfield Health Department, and we're doing a garden and food demonstrations there.
Wow. That's so remediation so turning like brown fields into growing healthy restorative spaces.
Right. Healing the soil basically.
Yeah.
And it's we're working with some great consultants. Andrew Lorian, he's the coordinator for that. So I just back him up with the youth and some of the administrative stuff. But I'm learning quite a bit myself. It's a fun project. Cool. And some of our more experienced youth from Home City Housing are working with that.
This is my first year. I'm taking a year off, even heal my body.
I hear you.
And mind from this a few years, decade of farming. But I was for a long time working with youth who are incarcerated.
Yes. Okay.
In different spots, and healing the land. Having that as our everyday work, just growing healthy plants and feeding soil, and then all of the receiving, ways that the land heals us in that process.
It's deep. Now I'm going to start letting people in because we have 2 that have joined us.
All right.
But it's a wonderful process, and it's wonderful to watch the youth develop. It has
Yeah.
done something. It does a lot for me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
Good evening to those who are joining us. Welcome, welcome. We'll be starting in a few minutes, about 3 minutes. And Douglas, you're in upstate New York?
I'm north of New York City. I'm
Oh,
in
okay.
the lower Hudson Valley.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it depends on who you're talking to, I guess, what upstate is.
Yeah. So I know some people from Albany and
Right.
Poughkeepsie.
But even folks in Albany, you know, they're like, we're not upstate. Like, you know,
Yeah.
or
They do remind me of that. So, oh, okay.
yeah, there's a lot more country north of there.
Yeah, it is. It is. Stephen, welcome. Thank you for joining us. 2 more minutes, folks. Did adding that second computer help you, Douglas?
Yes. Yeah.
Good.
So
Okay.
I've got that. So you can see my whole screen, right? Like it just,
I'm just looking at my screen, but we should be able to see yours.
okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Mhm. And for those who are beginning to join us, welcome to this wonderful workshop. We're pretty excited. If you can use the chat feature to let us know where you are coming from, it's always good to know what part of the region folks are coming from. And if you're looking for the chat feature, it should be towards the bottom of your screen when you put your cursor down. Oops. And we'll be starting in 1 more minute. I hope everyone's staying cool in their part of the country.
It's a bit of a challenge right now, I think.
Yeah, I know. I know.
I don't know if I was watching the John Lewis event today, and did you see one of the pallbearers fainted before?
Yes.
Poor guy.
Yes, and it's really hot down there. My mom's in Baltimore, and she said it's just a doozy down there right now.
I think it was at least 96, and then of course with the humidity and standing out in the sun for an hour, the guy has to feel really bad.
Yeah, but there's nothing you can do about it. You're gonna pass out. You're gonna pass out. No. All right. Well, everyone, it is 5 o'clock. Thank you for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to thank everyone, number 1, for joining our virtual summer conference, and number 2, for coming to this wonderful workshop that I'm pretty excited about. Tonight, our workshop is on envisioning an alternative to the agricultural industrial complex. I'm your host for tonight. My name is Anna Gilbert Muhammad. I am the Equity Director and Food Access Coordinator for NOFA Mass. I am based here in Springfield, Massachusetts, but I do work throughout the state. And we are joined tonight by Douglas DeCandia, who will be our presenter tonight. And so just a few housekeeping and thank yous before we get started. Like I said, looking forward to a wonderful presentation. We'd like to first thank all of our sponsors that sponsored both this workshop and our overall conference, and they also sponsor NOFA Mass and many of our programming. You're looking now at our gold sponsors. If you have a chance in your program book, click on those links, go to their websites, take a look at their items. They have some great things, and they are great supporters of NOFA Mass. You're now looking at our silver sponsors. I'm not going to name them all. Some of them you may be familiar with: Turtle Tree Biodynamic Seeds, Certified Humane, raised and handled for animal feed. But please, when you have time, patronize our sponsors. They have been so gracious to sponsor our conference this year. moving into some basic housekeeping items. As you know, as you came in, you were muted upon entry. We'd like for you to stay that way until it's that time for you to participate and to speak. The format of tonight's workshop, Douglas, our presenter, he's going to have some very interactive activities, so he will direct you until it's that time to take yourself off of mute. So if you can do that, that will be much appreciated. And when you do come off mute, say your comment or ask your question and put yourself right back on mute. Please use that chat feature anytime you have a question, if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, and again, we'll be using that during the workshop as well. The session is being recorded, so if anyone has any issues with being recorded, you can just turn off your video at any time. And lastly, we wanted to pay homage to our First Nations families who were here before colonialization. Currently, we are broadcasting, or I'm broadcasting to you from Springfield, Massachusetts. Now, that is where the Pocumtuck tribe lived. They ranged all the way from Enfield, Connecticut, the border of Connecticut and Massachusetts, up until through Deerfield. We have a link here that you can use, nativeland.ca, that you can click on. I'll put it in the chat so you can look for it, and you can see where, based on where you live, what First Nations people were there before you. So we want to take that time to honor and pay homage to who were here first before European settlers. So that's all from me. That's the last you'll hear from my mouth. I am now going to turn everything over to Douglas at this point. And again, if you run into any issues while you're in the workshop, please use the chat feature and I can help you out. So without any further delay, Douglas, the controls are yours. Please take it away.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, cool. Yeah, really honored to be here with everybody on this hot day. Don't know where everybody is, but I'm in so-called New York and it's somewhere in the 90s. So glad we could all be together and get through this together. As Anna said, my name is Douglas. I also go by Diggs. I use they and he pronouns. I'm calling in from Lenape territory in so-called Lower Hudson Valley of New York State. I have been growing food and medicine herbs for the last 10 years, working with youth, young folks, and folks of age that are currently incarcerated in prisons and jails across New York State, and growing food for folks that are with and for folks that are experiencing food apartheid and food insecurity. Just going to go through just a brief introduction and then a grounding, and then we can get into it. But I am a settler working at the margins of a racist food system while occupying unceded and stolen territories, including those of the Lenape and the Wappinger, and many others whose names I do not know. I benefit from white body privilege, and as such, I make a lot of mistakes. I recognize that I probably always will, and I'm deeply committed to growing and being accountable in all that I do, in this space included. I hope you take from this presentation what works and leave the rest. I would also like to honor the generations of Black, Indigenous, and people of color whose knowledge, methods, and wisdom are the foundation of regenerative agriculture, as well as the long lineage of subversive thinkers and radical agrarians, artists, and caregivers across time and space who too also believe that another world is possible. I share my gratitude to them as this presentation is a gathering from the study of their gifts. I am not a professional. I'm not an expert in any of this. I'm just learning myself, and I, as a white person, as a settler here, I feel a responsibility to be having this conversation with other folks who also occupy those positionalities, especially folks that are in agriculture, who also may be white and also are settlers. I would like before getting into the presentation, for all of us to start with a brief grounding, just to kind of center in our bodies. A lot of this work, and like a little trigger warning, this presentation we will be talking about racism and white supremacy and different systemic oppressive systems. This work is very bring up a lot of emotions and a lot of feelings. So I find it for myself to have a grounding and just before entering into a space like this, so that we can all kind of be, coming from a grounded and rooted place, and not a reactionary one. So if we could all just kind of sit, comfortably wherever we are, if we're inside, if you're on a chair, if you're on the ground, just taking a few deep breaths, acknowledging the land that you're on, holding the people whose land it is with you in this moment. If you do not know whose land, whose territory you are occupying, who you are on, Anna, I believe, shared a link, but I can also put that in the notes when I'm able, to link to a resource that can help at least begin a process of knowing whose land you are on. Holding that with you as breathing down, feeling your body resting on the chair or the ground that you are. And breathing in and following that breath down through your legs and your feet and onto the ground, onto where you are seated. And acknowledging that we are on land, that we are on our mother, the earth. So seeing with your heart's eye and your heart's vision, the land that your home or wherever you are is currently residing. Know that this land has been here for the beginning of time, and what once started as a rock floating through space began growing life in thousands and millions of years of life growing and dying and regenerating, has become the soil on which we are growing from and currently living upon and with. So taking in that long celestial history from the ground and breathing back up through our bodies. And if you can, imagine your eyes lifting up from where you are, looking down at your body, resting, and coming up, and the vision, almost like a camera going further up into the sky, looking down and seeing the land that surrounds you, the hills, the forest. There's water, and knowing that you are a part of a space, that wherever you are on indigenous land. Wherever you are somewhere and a part of a much broader community of human and more than human beings. And centering that and holding that in our work, that we are guests here, and as guests in any space, that we show up with respect and with honor and dignity for all that we are sharing the space with and all that who have come before us. And breathing back down into our bodies, and taking one more deep breath into our bellies, and exhaling together. All right. Well, again, thank you all so much for being here and for sharing the next 90 minutes of your time together. This workshop is entitled Envisioning an Alternative to the Agriculture-Industrial Complex. Can you all see the screen? Can you see, if you can shake your heads, you can see that? Okay, this is the first time I've done a Zoom call like this. So if anything doesn't feel right, please tell me or tell Anna. And the term agriculture industrial complex, I did not term that. I picked that up at different places. I'm not sure where that was initially became a term, but from my acknowledgement, it is a borrowed term of the prison industrial complex, which has been used by many, and most that I know by Critical Resistance, prison abolitionist organization out of New York City and California. But I loosely, personally, I define or use the agriculture industrial complex to mean a term that is used to describe the overlapping interests of government and industry to employ extractive agricultural practices, forced malnutrition, human subjugation, and land privatization so as to control food, land, and labor. And again, that is language loosely borrowed by Critical Resistance in their description of the prison industrial complex. We'll get into more about what makes up the agriculture industrial complex through the rest of this presentation. So I'm going to go to the next slide. All right, hopefully that worked. So the flow of this presentation, I'm going to go through a brief history of the U.S. food and agricultural system in the United States. There's going to be 9 slides that have pictures and text in them, and I'm going to spend 1 minute about with each of them. And on each of those slides, I ask if y'all could take 1 minute to reflect on what the slide, what that pictures and text brings up for you, and how that slide, the pictures and the text in that slide connect for you to the U.S. food system and agriculture in this country. So again, I'm going to go through those slides, and if you could just take a minute to, on your own, reflect on how those things connect for you to the food system and to the agriculture system in this country. And then after those 9 slides, we're going to come back together, and I'm going to ask for anybody who's willing to share what they thought and their reflections on that. And then we're going to go move into another reflection time, talking about what is currently not working in the food system, then what is working, and then a collective visioning of what a more just and equitable food system could look like moving into the future. So if that feels okay, I'm going to start with the first slide. And again, this first slide, we can do this together. These 3 images, texts here, just take a minute to reflect on any feelings, emotions that these bring up for you, and try to connect those feelings to, and these pictures to the food system in the United States and agriculture system here. So if everybody can see that, just take a minute to write down any thoughts or feelings that come up for you. All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide. And again, for anybody who may have just signed on, if you could just take 1 minute to reflect on any feeling, what this slide brings up for you and how it connects to the food system in the United States. This is the second slide. 1 minute, if you can. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. All right. And the fourth slide. Again, any feelings, emotions that come up for you seeing these? All right, next slide. Okay. Move on to the next slide. Oops, sorry. Again, how these images connect to the current food system in the United States. All right. Moving on, next one. second to last slide, again, how this picture conveys the history of the United States food system. I can give a hint if anybody can't recognize on the right. That is a map of a red line neighborhood. All right, and the final slide before going back to talk a little bit more. By Dr. August Dunning, and I can share this resource afterwards with everybody. All right. I'm going to go back to the first slide, and I'll ask if anybody has any, would like to share any of their feelings or connections to how this connects to the US food system, history and current. Anna, if you might be able to help me, I don't know if I can see everybody to call on anyone.
Sure. I see Stephen had his hands up.
Okay.
I didn't know if you were going to unmute me or I unmute me. So unmute. Well, to me, what I see, I mean, there's a number of things here, but what the middle slide appears to show a lot of farmland with hedgerows and modest field sizes, both of which have disappeared under the agricultural industrial complex.
Anybody else too? Thank you, Stephen. I don't know if folks who are on the phone can raise their hand if that's possible. I'm not sure, but Nina, would you like to?
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks. This for me just like points to like our roots in like Western culture and how we've looked at agriculture, and like just looking at how capitalism and feudalism specifically really laid the basis for I mean, how we look at ownership of land more than anything in my mind. That's really what came up for me.
Does anybody know where the Enclosure Movement have folks heard of that before, or the origins as far as England and medieval Europe have to do?
Does that refer to taking over the common land?
Yeah, from my understanding, that's what a lot of the Enclosure Movement was, an enclosure of the commons, which basically made it illegal for folks who had been living off of the land to continue to do so through the privatization of land, so through private property and forcing people to work in industrial works and become less self-sufficient. So in Indigenous Peoples' History of the United States, Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz talks a bit about how the Enclosure Movement in medieval Europe led to many folks, farmers, peasant farmers, majority being displaced from land and becoming available to come overseas to Turtle Island, or so-called North America, and become settlers here. And thus bringing with them the agricultural practices from Europe to this new land with them. So it's a moment of seeing how, for me, seeing how oppressed peoples can become oppressors or part of an oppressor class, and how that pattern of oppression and land privatization continue to this day to really act as a divide and conquer tool of the of the state to keep us separated from each other and from the land. So this quote by Silvia Federici is amazing. Silvia Federici is a wonderful historian who talks a lot about the rise of capitalism as it has to do with agrarian livelihoods. So if nobody has anything else, we'll move on to the second slide. Anybody has anything that be able to share on this?
I had a note. I just said, you didn't, are you going to post the second slide? Are you going to show it again?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't. There you go.
I just had in my notes, capitalism, racism at work to steal native lands.
Yeah.
Big time. I mean,
And
it's part
folks-
of what you said earlier, you know, like we come here as settlers from Europe and repeat taking everything was commons, and we steal it all as best we could. And of course, get rid of the indigenous populations while we're at it.
Folks who I can't see cameras, and I mean, I'm assuming everybody can see the screen. I don't know if people are calling in who can't see it.
We have a few people that did call in, but those
Okay.
who don't have cameras on, if you want to send in a comment, feel free to use the chat feature as well.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Stephen suggested, you know, this is part of the way that settlement and manifest destiny and the ways of settler colonialism as a means of imparting genocide upon indigenous people in order to take land and slowly build what has become this country. Our food system, just as this country, is built on land stolen by from indigenous people. Everywhere we move in this country is indigenous land, to hold that and know that. And so as we, you know, for me, this is really important because as someone who is a settler, is white, is working on land and with land, I have a constant question of how can I live in right relationship with this land, being an occupier of this space, being a descendant of folks who have benefited from settler colonialism, from white supremacy. I acknowledge that where I am now is stolen land. And so central in my regenerative, you know, in farming for me is also how supporting indigenous sovereignty and supporting land rights for indigenous people and actively engaging in returning land and rematurations of land to indigenous people. Because this is what our food system is built on. We'll go to the next slide. So if anybody, and you can just unmute yourself, I guess, and share. If we can't see you, raise your hand.
I think among other things, if I can, if I can jump in, anybody who questions some of the major origins of climate change based on how we destroy forests and why we are currently fighting the legislature to save the forest. I mean, this slide is kind of spells the story out pretty well.
I was curious, are the two pictures basically before and after correlated with the maps?
Yeah, from my thinking, putting these together, that's what it conveys. With settler colonialism, with European colonization of this continent came the ideas and methods and tactics, agricultural techniques from the so-called Old World, where tillage had been a practice for a long time. This continent and peoples who were and currently are stewarding and living and being with this land, tillage was a very new import from Europe. Many, folks who I'm sure know farming, growing vegetables in the Northeast, growing any kind of, fruiting, this land is forest. This land has been tended as forest for thousands of years. And when Europeans came here and cut the trees and drained the bogs and moved west and tilled the prairies, the Great Plains, that had deep ecological impacts that still resonate to this day. So the graph on the right is just a little bit, just like one resource showing kind of the ecological impacts of deforesting land at the extent that has happened and continues to happen across the continent. But this paved the way for the U.S. foodways and agriculture as is still practiced today with the tillage and the turning of soil and the imposition of the human idea of what agriculture is supposed to be, how growing crops is supposed to be, and not a listening to the land and following the land's lead, but a idea of control on the human side.
Comment, and in that same thought, it's also how Massachusetts government still thinks that forests need to be managed as opposed to letting forests manage themselves. Part of the same thought process that nature needs help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. On to the next one. So this one might be a little harder. Trying to get what's in my head onto an image that might convey, but did this bring up anything for anybody in relationship to the food system as we see today?
Mm-hmm. Douglas, it looks like Nina and then Stephen wanted to go.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I was actually excited when I saw this because it was confusing at first, but then it really started to make sense. I wasn't sure, like, witches, why? But I think it makes a lot of sense to me in terms of, like, our values when we came over here. Like, there was a lot of treatment of otherness as fearsome and scary, like, just terrible, right? And witches, the scare of witches, or what we would call the persecution of witches, back in England and here, like, was very much an anti-other sort of tactic. And, like, I don't think it's a surprise that women who were well acquainted with the land and natural medicines were targeted for otherness, and those who cared for the land in a different way other than, what how we value in Western culture. But yeah, just otherness in a general sense. I mean, like colonists were very much like face to face with Native American tribes during this time. And so to me, like these two images are just like a contrast of like, these are the people that we like to, or this is like a group of people that we like to demonize. And here's like like the people we like to value as owners and like not purveyors, but stewards of this land, you know, that in on Turtle Island specifically.
I might have said the same thing in fewer words. My comment was malevolent Christian purity unleashed.
Yeah. Both, and I would also add, I think the idea of the patriarchy that came with that Puritan modality and that Christian idea that was an import as well to this continent. The picture on the left, on my left, so-called witch hunts, you know, mostly cis straight men, white men targeting those women and people who may not have identified in the binary, but you know, as a control of the sources of production, mostly. And again, in Sylvia Federici's books, Caliban and the Witch, she goes in depth on the ways that the rise of capitalism and the witch hunts overlay as a means, the witch hunts particularly as a tactic in building a foundation for capitalism and resource extraction across the continent. David, did you want to say something?
Not yet, but
Gotcha.
Thanks.
Okay. And I think just the picture on the right, something that I'm sure we've all seen a painting of, just the dynamics within that, been looking at, you know, the way that it's the man holding the tool, it's the man standing in front of his wife, the man that's looking straight ahead, that these, you know, just as white supremacy, anti-Black racism, anti-indigeneity are ingrained within kind of this system that we are a part of here on this continent, in this country. The same goes with the idea of male supremacy and patriarchy as ingrained from the very beginning in our systems and our ways, and especially in agriculture. So yeah, everything that was shared, and those are also just a few extra thoughts. So the next slide, how this connects to the history and the current food system in this country. Anybody would like to share their feelings, thoughts about this?
I was going to say somebody else go first, but if you're not going to go, you just said to me, capitalism relies on some form of slavery. I mean, these are all forms of slavery, and there's another slide later on that, to me, says the same thing. Whether you're a farm worker, whether you're a prisoner, whether you're a field worker, whatever, you have to exploit someone in order to make that money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hello, Douglas. This is Shanette.
Hi, Shanette.
Hi. For me, this brought up the loss of land for African Americans in this country, which is still very prevalent. I actually have family in the South who have, you know, worked really hard through sharecropping to get land, and then had to fight like hell to keep it, and are still fighting today to kind of keep the little bit of land that they have left. So it's for me, it brought up the realities of landlessness for certain groups of people in the country.
Thank you for sharing, Shanette. And again, this country was able to grow and build and become the superpower, so-called, that it is today, on the foundation of labor by people that were taken from their homes, uncompensated for the work that they did in building the foundations, growing the raw materials that were sold through national and international markets to build the wealth of this country. So knowing that history is ongoing, as Shanette shared, this is not something that happened 400 years ago and doesn't have ongoing impacts, but the impacts of this are continued and felt to this very moment for many people, and for as a country, that to have a reckoning with that history it's long overdue. On to the next slide. So if anybody didn't know, this is a picture of the Dust Bowl, but particularly what this might be an example of as far as it connects to the history of this country, this food system.
I thought of, hi, this is Heather, particularly with this slide and, leading back up to this, the viewing agriculture as an extractive act of taking resources from the land, which is very different from the way that Indigenous people lived in relationship with the land, and then the consequences of that.
Thank you, Heather.
To go with that, and it's like extractive management of land, uber alles, destroys fertility and creates, rural poverty.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it certainly did in the Dust Bowl.
Yeah.
Because the extraction of the land is like, they don't care about anything except getting out of it what they can get out of it.
Hmm. Yeah. And that the Great Plains were once like one of the most expansive grasslands in the world, millions and millions of acres of prairie lands, of tall grass prairies and such, that were tilled in order to grow cereal grains for basically for a market, for food staples for folks here, but based on speculation, based on subsidies and profit and surplus, and this idea that food is something to be stored, is something to get money from, and the impacts on the land that has. The Dust Bowl was a human induced travesty, not an ecological mishap that may have just happened, but and this being one example of many across the history of this country, that of human practices that then cause a reaction of something ecologically. Also, I think for me, this time showed how the system of white supremacy, and again, I'll briefly define that as what I have learned it as, and I'll go back to this, but the idea which is backed by a system that sees white people, the white race, as superior to all other races, and especially the Black race and Indigenous race. This idea that has driven and so much of the food system and is basis of this country, the idea that white people are of a superior race, has impacts on those who are white or who have become white as well, and especially those who are poor or made poor. So as Stephen brought up, the rural poor many folks continue to be used to do the footwork of the idea, the kind of the empire's idea of westward expansion, of industry, that many of the folks who were part of the Dust Bowl and who suffered were white, but were used to do the tilling, do the planting. Their lives and their families were imparted for that idea of westward expansion that agriculture was being a part of in this moment. So just seeing, you know, for me, this is towards the idea of collective liberation, of mutual interest, that everybody, including white people, have a stake in ending racism and a stake in ending white supremacy, because it is something that is taking the lives of all people and the land continually. I'll go on to the next slide.
I'm happy to speak on this. For me, like the first thing that popped into my head was like the 13th Amendment, like 100%. I had not that long ago watched the Netflix documentary 13th. So it's like a very obvious and stark thing to see, but I think it's also very new information for a lot of people that we do use prison labor for agriculture in this country. So I'm, you know, not that it's a good image, but it's good to have more images like this circulated, and I think it's really important. But yeah, to me, this just speaks to like we really haven't changed much at all. Our system, when we first came and started destroying this land, is still, and its people, is still continuing, and we're still oppressing both the land and the people in it for the gains, for capital gains, basically.
Yeah, thank you.
If I could add, just to add on to what Nina said, it's exactly what she said, and it adds for me the current lack of value that we place on labor, on agricultural labor. Even today, our migrant workers are still paid horribly, and we still do, even today, use prison labor as a means of agricultural labor, and we just don't place any value at all on the people that actually grow our food, the real farmers.
I'll come back to my 2 slides back where I said capitalism relies on slavery of some sort. This is all slavery of some sort.
Yeah. So 70% of the people that make up the workforce in agriculture are born outside of this country. So quote unquote migrant farm workers, 70% of folks are born outside of the United States. And also there's an estimate of upwards of 30,000 people who are incarcerated currently work in agriculture or food related positions, making less than $1 per day today. So yeah, as Nina shared, the 13th Amendment abolished slavery of some forms, except for anybody who is in prison. And the language of that amendment says basically that to this very day that slavery is justified if someone is held by the state and incarcerated. And then as Stephen points out, the similar tactics of labor exploitation are occurring with so-called migrant farm workers, people that are coming to this country because of different means, but through much of US global imperialism and dislocation has driven many people from self-sustaining livelihoods to be dependent on a wage and coming to this country to find money to support their families who have been impacted by imperialism. And then this slide.
my note says racism, farm to market.
Yeah. So and this is just a note, in 1910, 16 million acres of farmland were owned and cultivated by Black families. Now that's less than 1% of farmland in this country is owned by Black families. There has been a targeting and systemic way of removing Black people from land, from ownership of land, for ever since Reconstruction, ever since the abolition of slavery or emancipation. And that has come through the USDA, that has come through individual acts of racism and white supremacy, from the KKK to the different ways of people targeting and terrorizing Black people and removing people from land. And the picture on the right is a photograph of Philadelphia, a redlined image of Philadelphia. And I don't know if anybody would like to share anything about redlining. But just as a means, if nobody does, I'll just share a quick few words on that. Redlining is a systemic denial of various services to residents of specific, often racially associated neighborhoods or communities, either directly or through the selective raising of prices. While the best known examples of redlining have involved denial of financial services such as banking or insurance, other services such as healthcare and even supermarkets have been denied to residents. In the case of retail businesses like supermarkets, purposely locating stores impractically far away from targeted residents, resulting in a redlining effect. So this is another example of how the food system today really works. These racialized barriers that are put up really have keep people either to access or without access to life's necessities, such as access to food, to grocery stores, to land, to education, to open spaces. So this is something that to this day is happening, and the impacts of this are continuing to happen. So the final, sorry.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I was just going to say that, and then also, as part of that redlining of food, like the lack of good supermarkets, the lack of good food. So people of low income or minorities are disproportionately affected by the poisoned food that they get from the agricultural industrial complex, which I think you show in your next slide about poisoned food. But
yeah. So the effects of all this history, I think is kind of wrapped up in this slide by Dr. August Dunning, who did an extensive study on the so-called nutrient density or mineral concentration of foods over the last 100 years or so, overlaid with the rise in mechanization of agriculture, the use of pesticides, and that overlaid with diet-related diseases and food-related illnesses.
And Douglas, Eric had a comment leading to the food deserts we see today in urban centers. I think you brought that out in that previous slide.
Yes.
But I just wanted to lift up his comment and Heather's, and powers given to the landowners, not the laborers. Our agricultural system is predicated on private land ownership. So thank you all for those comments.
Yes. Thank you all.
Could I possibly get a copy of this slide? I mean, I work on glyphosate, as you may or may not know, and I haven't seen this particular slide. I like it. It's got a good impact.
Yeah, definitely. I can send. this is just a note, if at the end of this, if everybody who's comfortable could share maybe, and maybe we already have it, but emails, and I can share a list of resources and such with everybody. But yeah, you know, I think everything that we've looked at, these last 8 slides have, to me, shown, just led to this current moment, this snapshot in this moment of what land theft, of what exploitation of land and people, of what, you know, profit before people, the ideas of these things, what this has led to. And today, you know, we are in a moment where food just lacks the concentration of life enhancing, life necessity minerals and nutrition. And as this slide shows, you know, as the mechanization of land, as the tilling of land, as the introduction of different biocides and pesticides are used on land and on plants, how that correlates to, you know, a decrease in foodborne minerals, as the life of the soil is jeopardized. And then thus the response that human beings and human nutrition has to that loss of food nutrition, that, you know, as the land gets hurt and suffers, the people also are hurt and suffer. So that kind of brief walkthrough, moving through, I asked this question, is the food system broken? And I asked that with, I don't know, kind of open that up. Is it, Nina?
Doesn't feel broken because it seems like it was built from the start like this. It was made to work this way.
Yeah, Eric Jimenez, among many others, a Food First, you know, was the first person that I read from, who said the food system is not broken, but it's working just as it was built to. It has been broken since the very beginning. So, you know, we can't say that it's broken over time when something is built on faulty foundations. And a system that is built on oppression of Black people, of Indigenous people, of women and queer people, one that is built on the idea of human superiority to the way of nature, is one that is inherently flawed. And so with that idea, if we have not seen a food system that has actually worked, if we have never seen a food system that has met the needs of all people, then it's kind of, you know, if we want to have a future, if we want to have a world, an earth, you know, clean air and clean water for people, for more than human people to live into the future, something's got to change. And a change is necessary. So in order to build a more just and equitable food system, takes the visioning, collective visioning, and a mobilization to the movement leaders, to folks who have been doing this work for a long time, but that there is a change coming. And so towards recognizing that change and moving towards that change, I think it's important to recognize what the limitations are that we are all facing in this moment. So something that really, for me, a framework of understanding, a framework of kind of engaging in not just work with folks who are incarcerated, but also work with the food system is a framework of abolition. And this quote by Fred Moten and Stefano Harney at the very bottom, I think for folks who might not be familiar with the term abolition or contemporary abolitionist movements, the quote here, I think, can give a little idea of what we're talking about. So I'll say it for folks who are on the phone and can't see. But what is, so to speak, the object of abolition? Not so much the abolition of prisons, but the abolition of a society that could have prisons, that could have slavery, that could have the wage, and therefore not abolition as the elimination of anything, but abolition as the founding of a new society. And this is from a book called The Undercommons by Fred Moten and Stefano Harney. For me, this conveys that system, that there's abolition and the ending of practices and things that diminish life and harm life. It is not so much looking at the symptoms of those things. It is the abolition of prisons and of slavery and of the wage, but it is also an abolition of the system that creates prisons and creates slavery and the wage. And I think we've talked a lot about that, because it is those that also create an unjust food system. That same system also leads to exploitative labor, extractive agricultural practices, all of the things that are leading us in this moment to have to engage in regenerative agriculture, have to engage in a practice of healing agriculture. I don't know if the conversation around of regenerative agriculture actually gets to why we are having to regenerate in the first place. Regenerative agriculture to me is a practice of healing, is an act of healing. And so if we don't ask what are we healing from, it's often, it can be easy to not think about and not take in the long history of colonization, of extraction that have led us to this moment of having to heal. And it is that same system that leads to land being degraded, that has also led to people's lives being taken through prisons, through slavery, in this moment by police violence, by the things that we're seeing rising up in this moment, that all of these things are interrelated. And I want to connect this to our work as agrarians, food systems, people, whoever is on this phone call, have it in some relationship with the food system. And so I think like the systemic ways of oppression, and by systemic I mean the ways that these forms of oppression infiltrate all of our systems and institutions. For example, institutionalized and systemic racism, not particularly talking about individual acts of racism, individual acts of bigotry. Those things are not so much what I'm talking about, but the ways that that racism and white supremacy have become part of our systems and are so ingrained in our systems, agricultural system, food system, education system, prison system, that we don't even know that that's what it is. And these things exist everywhere. It is the air that we breathe. And so I think it's really important, if we are to move forward, is to know that what we are existing in and where we have been. So I want to ask everybody to take just a few minutes. We have about 20 minutes left of the workshop, but take like 2 to 3 minutes to reflect on how any or all of these 4 things, white supremacy, cis heteropatriarchy, settler colonialism, and racial capitalism, how those express in our farms, in our businesses, in our families, in our lives, but particularly how these are expressing in our own individual lives, and how that in our food system, and how we participate in that. So I can I'll just give a brief definition if folks who may not be, just an idea of what the four of these are. So white supremacy is an ideology backed by a system that believes white people are superior to those of all other races, especially the Black race, and should therefore dominate society. Cis heteropatriarchy is a system of power based on the supremacy and dominance of cis heterosexual men through the oppression of women and LGBTQIA people. Settler colonialism is a distinct type of colonialism that functions through the replacement of indigenous populations with an invasive settler society. Settler colonialism destroys to replace, aiming to banish indigenous peoples and replace them with settlers. And racial capitalism is an economic and political system that makes profit from creating a race system and using this to exploit people based on these racial identities. And just a note, Keeanga Yamada Taylor, who is a co-founder of Black Lives Matter and professor of African American Studies at Princeton, notes that capitalism has always been racial, not just in this country, but across time. So those four things, I ask if everybody could just take a few minutes to reflect on how any or all of these, and again, these do overlay and intersect with each other, but any examples of how these are currently showing up in your life, on farms, in the food system, however be it. So we'll take just about 3 minutes and then we'll come back and I'll ask anybody to share your thoughts.